Hi, everybody. Good evening. Good evening, and just to put things in chronological format here, this is welcome to Conversations with Calvin, We the Species, and we're actually, when this gets broadcast, is a little bit different, but we're kind of 2 days away from a snowstorm, so you all can figure out the exact date. But this is really kind of a special show tonight. I'm with a recent Rutgers graduate, SHUBHECHA DHAR, and she graduated Rutgers in a class of 20 and has such an interesting resume. But more importantly, of course, we met on LinkedIn because that's where I meet everybody except my wife. I didn't meet my wife on LinkedIn. I met my wife in a bar in New York a long time ago. But we met on LinkedIn, and great chemistry, and the matrix of our bond is Rutgers, and then one thing led to another, and then we go through the process of discovery. And SHUBHECHA, tells me that she has embattled social anxiety disorder, which, and I start to process and try to unpack that, and of course she's written a book. We're going to talk all about that, and the housekeeping is, of course, the flashing of the screen. You'll find all the contact information on SHUBHECHA, LinkedIn, and also where you can get a pre-sale copy of this book, which I'm going to kind of, it's called Anxiously Thriving, and how brave and amazing for this young woman to have written this book, which is now available. And also she's done the TEDx talk, which is also amazing. And you put all those things together. I'm talking a lot, but you put all the things together and you did a TED talk. So I am so pleased and thrilled to introduce you. So just, a little bio and talk a little bit about Rutgers, your experience, and then we're going to get into social anxiety disorder. Take it away.
Yeah, thank you for that introduction, Calvin. So my name is SHUBHECHHA and I'm from Mumbai, India. I just graduated from Rutgers University this past May with a bachelor's in communication and a specialization in public relations. Rutgers community has greatly influenced my life, and my book is a reflection of that. I'm the author of the upcoming book, Anxiously Thriving, a book all about social anxiety disorder and how it impacts the lives of teenagers and young adults and how they thrive despite it. The book explores intersections of mental health in South Asian communities and how anxiety can have an impact on early teenage and adulthood years. My hope is that by reading this book, you will discover that not just surviving with social anxiety, but thriving with social anxiety is very much possible. And my book comes out in April 2021, but the pre-sale campaign is going on right now, and I've already pre-sold over 60 copies of it.
Wonderful, wonderful. That's wonderful. So, I was an author too a long time ago, and it's a wonderful undertaking writing, but we'll talk about that shortly. So I'm curious so I don't know a lot about it. As a matter of fact, I don't know anything about it. But how did you discover you had social anxiety disorder?
Yeah, that is a good question. So my discovery was a very interesting, unusual discovery. When I was growing up, I was always labeled as shy, quiet, and awkward by everyone I knew. And I would avoid going to I would avoid going to basically any social interaction. I would, even if my friends invited me to a party, I would just be like, no, like I can't come today, because I was afraid of being negatively evaluated by people. I was afraid of being rejected in social situations. So at that time, I didn't know that there was a word for this, social anxiety. I grew up in India where no one really talks about mental health. So I didn't know what was going on with me. And I was looking for answers. So one night, I just poured all my emotions onto Google's search box. Now, this is something I do not recommend because whenever you put your symptoms on Google, it just shows up cancer. But in my case, the words social anxiety disorder showed up. And so I spent the night reading about social anxiety. And I was like, hey, like that sounds like me, like I might have social anxiety disorder, but I wasn't too sure if I had it or not. And I knew that only a counselor would be able to tell me if I had social anxiety or not. And so that is how like I decided to go to CAPS, which is the counseling center at Rutgers. So that is when I went to CAPS and I found out that I had social anxiety for pretty much my entire life without even knowing it. And it's actually very common for people with social anxiety to, seek help for it much later in their lives. In fact, around 36% of people with social anxiety disorder report experiencing symptoms 10 or more years later. And that is what happened with me. I mean, 10 years is a long time to, struggle alone. And this is something I want to change. This is something I want to change with my book. And I want to encourage people to seek help. And that is what I'm trying to do with my book.
Or is that noble, beyond noble? And it's so statistically and it's pretty prevalent, and yet it goes undiagnosed. People don't realize it. People don't pursue it. So you're putting it out there. Um, so you have social anxiety disorder. So how did this impact your life? Um,
Yeah, so having social anxiety disorder, it took such a toll on my day-to-day activities. When I started college, I was living with roommates I didn't know. So that was very awkward to live with people you don't know. And my roommates would bring over people, and I was just so, embarrassed to be in front of a lot of people that I would just end up locking myself up in my room, and I would like not come out, like I would not initiate conversations with anyone. And even in classes, when the professor would ask a question and I knew the answer to it, like I knew it was the correct answer, I still could not raise my hand to answer it because like I felt like, what if my answer was wrong? What if I say something stupid? And like, what if everyone laughs at me? So even despite knowing the answer, I wouldn't raise my hand. And like class participation is a huge portion of your grade. Like for some of my classes, 20% was just class participation. And that was something I wasn't able to do. So in my freshman year, my grades also took a toll because of that. So it really like impacted my life in a very, very negative way. But the good news is that anxiety disorders are highly treatable and you can definitely learn coping techniques for it.
what made you finally like seek help? When did you, in your chronologically, when in your Rutgers time did you seek help for this?
Yeah, so I found out that I had social anxiety disorder in my sophomore year of college. Like when I Googled it and I found it out, and I was like, I might have this. But after finding it out in my sophomore year, it took me one entire year to actually gather the courage to go to the counseling center. So it was in my junior year of college that I went to the counseling center. And what pushed me to go to the counseling center was this one specific night that I remember. So I just moved into this new apartment at Rutgers with roommates I didn't know, and they threw like a party in our living room, and there were like a lot of people coming in, and I was just so overwhelmed by that. So there were a lot of people in our living room showing up, and I just locked myself up in my door, and I that night I wanted to go out to in at that night I wanted to go out in the living room to get like water and like food and stuff, because like the living room and the kitchen is like attached. So I wanted to go out to get water and like food, but I was just like, so, like I just could not step out. So that night, like I just starved myself. Like I never stepped out of my room. And that night I was so like frustrated with myself. I was, like tired of living a life that I couldn't fully live. And that incident pushed me to seek help. And like the next day I, took the Rutgers bus and I went to CAPS. So that is like what pushed me to go to CAPS. And at CAPS, I joined group counseling, and like for the first time at group counseling, I met so many people who were just like me. And I didn't even know what the word social anxiety meant. And to see all these people who also have social anxiety, I felt like I'd found, like my community, I guess. So just knowing that I was not alone in my struggles was, comforting in itself. And the counselors, they basically educated us about social anxiety disorder. I had social anxiety disorder for so long, um, but I fully didn't even know what it meant and all of its symptoms and everything. And the counselors basically educated us on that. They told us all the symptoms of social anxiety disorder. And I was surprised at how much I didn't even know about something I had. So they told us that social anxiety also has physical symptoms like nausea and sweating, your heart starts to race, and like all these other symptoms are associated with social anxiety disorder. So it's not just something like in your head, like it's physical too. And that is what we learned. We did something which is called CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, where they taught us how we could restructure our thoughts. So the counselors, they also, so they would pretend to be, like a random person at a party or an interviewer. They would just like pretend to be random people, and we would practice having interactions with them so that we can do those interactions in real life as well.
So you took all of this, the learning, a whole year to go for help, and then you evolve and you become a peer leader, which you'll explain what that is. You become a peer leader, and then you go on to actually teach a course, a 1 credit course at Rutgers, and then you also go on to become a TEDx speaker, which I not in a million years would I ever do that. So, I mean, that's a wow. That is a huge wow. By the way, so talk to me how all that happened, and also, so you're gonna kind of talk how you became a peer leader in the TEDx and how you taught a class. And where are you now today with, is that in your back pocket, social anxiety disorder? Uh, is that done with you, or you still have to be aware of it? That's my other question.
Mhm. Yeah, so when I was at group counseling, our counselors made us create a list of around 12 social situations that caused us anxiety. And we basically wrote those from like number 1 to number 12. So from the most anxiety inducing to like the least. And something that was on my list, number 12, was interacting with strangers. Okay. Okay. So then, after I created that list, we were supposed to work on it and, try to like cross things off from that list. And I happened to come across this opportunity to teach a 1 credit class at Rutgers. And basically, I would be teaching this class all by myself to 30 students. And the name of the class was Are You Fit? And it was basically a 1 credit course for international students. So every single freshman international student has to take this course. It is mandatory. And this course is taught by upperclassmen at Rutgers. So I saw this opportunity and I was like, maybe, I should give it a shot. And, you know, if
Wow.
I teach this class, I'll be interacting with like 30 strangers. And that is something I could cross off from my list. So I went ahead and I gave the interview for that. And luckily I got chosen. And last fall, I taught that 1 credit class to 30 students all by myself. And it truly, truly was such a great experience. And since then, I've been able to cross off every situation from my list. And something that was number one on my list was public speaking. And I crossed that off too when I gave the TED-styled talk at Mark Conference. Mark Conference is organized by Rutgers Leadership Department. And each year they have a very, diverse uh, they have very diverse speakers each year, and they also choose around 8 to 9 student speakers. So I interviewed for that and I got the opportunity to share my story with social anxiety. And something really cool that I did on stage was I pulled out this list that I had created at group counseling. I pulled it out and I grabbed a pen and I checked off public speaking in front of everyone on the stage.
Wow.
Yeah. So
That is so huge. I mean, I mean, public speaking, whether you have social anxiety disorder or not, is one of the hardest things. Uh, and I'm on camera now, but I was never keen on being on camera. And maybe I had it and went undiagnosed. I could never get in front of a stage. I could never talk to groups of people. I was pretty shy and quiet myself. And what's interesting, there was no Google when I was growing up. Um, but listening to you now, it's so interesting because I'm listening to you and I'm saying maybe I had some elements of that because I was awfully quiet. I never went to a party
mhm.
in high school. Never had a date. Um, Never went to a prom. Never went to a dance. And maybe that's we'll talk about that off camera sometime. So, but listening to you and I realize in my evolution that one of the hardest things in the world is public speaking. It's like wow. So I just tip my hat to you. It's just great. Um, Before we go on and kind of wrap this, I just want to go off topic a second with you, and you're smiling. I like to go off topic, and I just want to ask you a Calvin question. So here's the setup. Um, Excluding family or friends, someone living or dead that you'd like to spend a day with during the pandemic.
Oh,
Yeah.
that is a very interesting question.
It is. I told you it would be.
Yeah, so I think I'm gonna have to say J.K. Rowling, the author of Harry Potter. And the reason for that is growing up, I was obsessed with the Harry Potter series. And I think that was one of the first books I read. That is how I got interested in reading and writing. And if you know about J.K. Rowling's story with publishing and writing, she was rejected. Her manuscript was rejected a lot of times
20
before.
times, something like that. Yeah.
yeah, her manuscript was rejected a lot of times before it got published. And so I think it would be so inspiring for me as as an upcoming author to be able to spend a day with someone who is like such an accomplished author. I
Great
feel like
answer.
I could learn a lot from her.
Great answer. So I'm going to show everybody again what inspired you, because writing a book is a hard thing. So what inspired you to write Anxiously Thriving? There had to be an inspiration. And also, I'd love to know, because I'm finishing my second novel. What is the hardest part of writing for you?
Yeah, so after I gave that TED-style talk at my conference, I had a lot of people in the audience come up to me and tell me that they could relate to my story and they could relate to my struggles, and they were also going through the same thing I was going through. And a lot of them were asking me, for advice, and I and like a lot of them did not have the resources they needed to be able to cope with anxiety. And that is when I realized that a lot of people are struggling with it and they need help. And that is what motivated me to write this book, because with this book I want to provide support to every single person with social anxiety, and I want them to know that they are not alone in their struggles. So that was the inspiration behind this book. And to answer your second question about what was the hardest part about writing it, personally, I think for me, the hardest part about writing it was being vulnerable. In this book, I share certain like snippets from my life, certain incidents from my life, and it's just so hard to be vulnerable and just put yourself out there. It's really hard to do that. I know a lot of people are going to read this book, they're going to read my personal experiences, and for someone with social anxiety, that is kind of like really something. It was very hard to do, basically. Yeah, so I think for me the most hardest part was being vulnerable.
How long did it take you to write that? How long?
Yeah. So I think I started writing that in June this year. So I guess a couple months after the lockdown started.
Okay.
So I started writing in June, and in like since then I've been working on this book. The book is about 75% done. I'm gonna write some more. I'm still so yeah, so over these couple of months I've been interviewing people with social anxiety. I've interviewed counselors, psychologists, therapists. I've been doing a lot of interviews, and with my story, I'm also sharing stories of other people with social anxiety, and I'm also sharing expert insights from mental health experts that I have interviewed.
Wow. So you and I, off camera, we're going to talk about networking and getting the message out. Listening to you, I got some ideas. We'll talk off camera. Finally, to kind of wrap, because there's a big audience out there that's young people, and young Rutgers people, young non-Rutgers people. Do you have any messages for people who are struggling with
Yeah.
social anxiety disorder?
Yeah, so I know that when you have social anxiety disorder, you want to go out and you want to hang out with all these people. You want to interact with everyone, but you are just not able to do that. And when you are not even able to have daily conversations, it is hard to reach out and ask for support. So it is really isolating to have social anxiety. So I just want everyone with social anxiety to know that they are not alone. And I want them to know that it is very much possible to thrive with social anxiety. There is hope. There's always hope. And one piece of advice, I guess, that I would have is to remove yourself from the social situation and view it from an outside perspective. And I want to explain what this means. So at my group counseling, we basically had this discussion session where a lot of us, we were sharing with our counselors how going to the dining hall makes us very anxious. So Rutgers, so on College Ave, Rutgers has a dining hall named Browers, and basically to go into that dining hall, there is this ramp, like a slope, and you have to walk down that. And basically, a lot of us were telling our counselors that whenever we walk down this slope, we feel like we might trip, and others are gonna watch us and laugh at us. So we were just telling our counselors how we are anxious to go down that slope, and our counselors told us, well, like, take yourself out of that situation and imagine if someone else was walking down that slope and they tripped, would you laugh at them? And a lot of us, I mean, all of us said no, like we would empathize with them, we would go to them and we would offer to help them. And that is what I mean by take yourself outside from that situation and you will see that situation differently.
This has been a priceless chat with you and an interview with you. And I'm so glad that we found each other on LinkedIn and the shared, and we communicated, and here we are, the process, that we had a chance to talk about this, to share this, because it's giving back. It's a wonderful exploration, and you're so good at compacting and unpacking and discussing this, because you lived it, and this was a very powerful, for me, a very powerful interview, because I learned a lot, and it kind of made me do a lot of thinking. And you may have just cost me an evening of sleep, because I'm going to go back and try to fall asleep later thinking, did I have social anxiety, or who knows? And it's not important now, because I'm fine and you're fine. So I want to thank you so much for your time and your energy and your caring. And again, to everybody watching, there it is, and all the contact information will be there. Actually, I'm going to wish you good luck. Oh, I was going to wish you good luck in finals, but you're done with finals. You're out. I'm wishing everybody good luck with finals these last couple of weeks, but you're a graduate. By the way, did you ever see the movie, putting you on the spot, the movie The Graduate?
I actually have not.
Well, I was asked this, by the way. I've been asking this for about 50 years. I'm dating myself. I always ask young graduates if they saw the movie The Graduate. It came out in 1960 something. It's kind of a historic old movie, not important. What's important is I thank you so much for this time that we spent together, and I'm wishing you all good things, and you know what, you can come back, we can do another session and talk about the whole phenomenon of writing a book and publishing and all this other stuff. So thank you so much, and to be continued. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
My pleasure. My pleasure.